The story begins with a boy named Thor, who as a child was playing with his friends in a freezing, snow-covered region where everyone saw him as weak. While playing near a river with dangerously cold water, their toy landed on a floating slab of ice, and none of the kids were brave enough to retrieve it. All eyes turned to Thor, silently challenging him to prove himself. Determined to show he wasn't weak, Thor jumped onto one chunk of ice, then another, and managed to grab the toy. But on his way back, the ice cracked beneath him and he plunged into the freezing water, instantly swept away by the current. In temperatures far below zero, even a few extra seconds could have meant death, but luckily his friends were nearby, and one of them managed to grab him and pull him to safety. Struggling to breathe, Thor was rushed to the hospital, and when his parents learned what happened, they were furious and forbade him from going outside again, afraid he would risk his life once more. Thor felt defeated. He had tried to prove his bravery but ended up nearly dying, and the failure crushed his confidence. As time passed, the story shifts to an island inhabited by numerous distinct tribes, so diverse that anyone would be confused by the variety of human types living there. Thor is now grown and has become an adventurer, traveling to unexplored places. He arrives on this island with his girlfriend, eager to explore and research undiscovered mysteries scattered across the vast ocean and its many unknown islands. What troubled him most, however, was a question: who were the true ancestors of these tribes? Who were the first humans to arrive on this island and begin expanding their population? Seeking answers, Thor speaks with an elderly tribesman and indirectly asks about their origins, who their ancestors were, what they looked like, and how they arrived. The old man shares what he was told by his own parents, explaining that everything begins in the east and ends in the west. According to him, their powerful ancestors came from a massive island in the eastern direction, following the path of the sun as they traveled westward, settling on every island they encountered and expanding their people. Thor is startled by this claim because, based on known geography, no such island exists in that direction, and he begins to suspect that the old tribesman may not be telling the truth. Still, as an adventurer, Thor knew he couldn't dismiss the old man's claim without solid proof, and a deep curiosity had taken root inside him. He needed to uncover the truth about these ancestors. He remained on the island for years, continuing his research. Later, the scene shifts to the city, where Thor approaches a publisher, hoping to get his years of research into print. Sitting across from the head of the publishing house, Thor explains his bold theory. The tribes living on that island did not come from Asia, as widely believed, but from an island in the east connected to South America. For generations, scholars had claimed the island's inhabitants migrated from Asia because Asians possessed the boats and technology capable of surviving the vast ocean. Thor, however, firmly argues that the first settlers were South Americans, not Asians. The publisher quickly dismisses his idea, insisting that ancient Americans lacked the maritime technology required for such a journey, while Asians clearly had the necessary vessels. Despite the pushback, Thor refuses to abandon his research. After a heated debate, the publisher challenges him. If he truly believes South Americans were the first to reach the island, then he should prove it by sailing there himself using only the kind of primitive raft they would have had. The challenge is enormous. Crossing a massive ocean on a small raft is life-threatening, especially in waters where even large ships can sink, but if he succeeds, his theory could finally be published. Determined, Thor accepts and begins seeking funding. He pitches his plan to multiple investors, outlining how he intends to travel thousands of miles across the ocean not on a modern luxury ship but using ancient techniques and a simple raft. He confidently claims that South Americans reached the island first and promises to prove it if given financial backing. While Thor believes completely in himself, the investors do not. They reject his proposal, calling it impossible and reckless. To them, crossing such a vast and dangerous ocean on a small raft is suicidal, something no one has ever done, and they argue that decades of established research cannot simply be overturned. Thor walks away disappointed. His passion and determination are strong, but without support, they seem meaningless in the face of such overwhelming doubt. Feeling defeated, Thor walks into a bar where several seasoned sailors are gathered and boldly presents his plan to cross the ocean on a small raft. These men have spent years at sea, so he even lays out the design of his raft, explaining how he is building a team and how, once the expedition succeeds, everyone involved will gain recognition and financial reward. His confidence is powerful, but one veteran sailor begins questioning him, saying he has survived countless voyages across dangerous waters and that attempting to cross the vast ocean on such a fragile raft sounds absurd and suicidal. He bluntly warns Thor that continuing with this plan is like inviting death and criticizes the raft's design, predicting that its ropes would snap within days. Refusing to join the expedition, the man shuts him down. Thor simply smiles and leaves, but another man who had been quietly listening follows him outside. His name is Haim, and he admits he is intrigued by Thor's research. At first, both men assume the other is just another salesman, but Haim soon reveals he is actually an electrician forced to take odd jobs to survive. After carefully considering Thor's vision, Haim decides to join the team, genuinely inspired by the mission. Thor is thrilled, his team is finally beginning to take shape, and he continues persuading others to come aboard. However, a major obstacle remains: he still has no funding, and without money, there will be no equipment or supplies. Days pass, and Thor receives a call from his wife, worried because he hasn't been home in a long time. With the holidays approaching, he usually returns home, but this time he refuses, prioritizing his mission. His wife is deeply concerned. Thor cannot even swim, and she feels he is neglecting his responsibilities as a husband and father to their 2 children, choosing a dangerous dream over the safety and stability of his family. But Thor refuses to stop. He has already invested years of his life into this research, and turning back is no longer an option. He bluntly tells his wife that from now on she will have to manage on her own, then ends the call and heads straight to the harbor, unaware of how dangerous the journey ahead will be. At the port, he learns that 3 more members have joined his expedition, meaning his core team is finally complete. All that remains is to build the raft. Surrounded by massive logs, Thor gathers his crew and makes it clear that the raft must be constructed exactly as their ancestors would have built it. He already has the design prepared, and he gives strict instructions that no modern upgrades or alterations are allowed. If they add any advanced modifications, critics will accuse them of cheating, so this voyage must remain a completely fair test of his theory. Construction begins at full speed while Thor continues searching for financial backing. He approaches numerous businessmen and influential figures but faces rejection everywhere, until one businessman truly understands Thor's passion and vision. After hearing the full depth of his research, this investor finally agrees to fund the expedition, giving the team the resources and equipment they desperately need. Soon, news of the daring mission spreads, and newspapers begin publishing articles about the ambitious attempt to cross the ocean on a primitive raft. The team gradually gains public attention, and a cameraman from a reporting company approaches Thor, asking to join the expedition to document the entire journey. Realizing the publicity could strengthen their credibility, Thor and his team accept him, adding 1 more member to the crew. Before long, the raft is completed, and everyone is ready. On the day of departure, crowds gather at the harbor to see them off, but the mood is not celebratory. Most people believe the team is sailing towards certain death, so their farewell feels more like a final goodbye. As Thor and his crew set sail, however, they sit proudly on the raft, feeling like celebrities embarking on a historic mission. What follows is a brutal test by nature and the sea, waters so unforgiving that no one has ever successfully escaped them. The team is now far from shore with nothing but their handmade raft, carrying limited food supplies, a small lifeboat, and a radio setup to maintain occasional contact. Everyone is focused on completing the mission, but as night falls and they drift deeper into the ocean, the waves grow violent. Duties have already been assigned, yet suddenly massive swells begin crashing over the raft, flooding it with water and slamming it from all sides. Thor and 1 crew member rush out to secure the structure, but in the chaos the raft jerks violently. Thor loses his footing, and he falls straight into the ocean. He cannot swim. For a terrifying moment, he is helpless in the dark water, but his crewmates react instantly and pull him back on board just in time. Situations like this are deadly, especially in the open ocean, but even someone who cannot swim can increase their chances of survival by staying calm and using proper floating techniques. One effective method is the back float. Keep your head tilted slightly upward for breathing, spread your arms and legs wide like a starfish, keep your stomach facing up, and avoid panicking. Panic wastes energy and increases the risk of sinking. Another technique, useful in rough waves, is the survival float. Face downward in the water with your body spread out, lifting your head only when you need to breathe. This reduces the impact of large waves and helps conserve energy. Whenever possible, grab onto any floating object such as wood or debris to improve buoyancy. Many people make the mistake of flailing their arms upward in fear, which actually causes them to sink faster, but controlled floating keeps you stable even in saltwater. By morning, however, Thor and his crew discover the storm has already taken its toll. The relentless waves have damaged the raft, several logs have cracked or broken, and it has only been a few days since they began their journey, making the harsh reality of the expedition painfully clear. Their journey is still incredibly long, and no one knows what new dangers are waiting ahead. The next morning, while everyone is busy with their assigned tasks, they notice movement beneath the water. Looking closely, they realize a whale shark is circling their raft. Thor immediately tells everyone to stay calm, explaining that whale sharks are generally harmless and won't attack humans. They will likely swim away on their own. But Haim, the electrician, begins to panic. He becomes convinced that the massive creature will ram the raft, flip it over, and kill them all. Despite Thor's clear orders not to act, Haim grabs a sharp weapon. The crew tries to stop him, but he refuses to listen and throws the spear directly at the whale shark. The weapon pierces deep into its body, and as the wounded animal dives into the ocean, they realize the rope attached to the spear is still tied to the raft. Suddenly, the raft jerks violently as the massive creature pulls downward, threatening to drag them under or tear the structure apart. The raft's direction shifts dangerously, and in a frantic rush, the crew scrambles to cut the rope. At the last possible moment, they manage to sever it, saving the raft from being destroyed. Everyone is furious at Haim for his reckless decision and nearly turns on him, but Thor steps in and stops the confrontation. He reminds them that he is the leader and final decision-maker on this expedition. For now, they accept his authority, but the unity within the group is beginning to crack. As days pass, their supplies start running low. The large radio they relied on for communication suddenly fails, cutting them off completely from the outside world. Isolation sets in. Haim's mental state deteriorates rapidly. He becomes increasingly negative, convinced they will not survive. He keeps pointing out how the constant exposure to water is loosening the raft's logs and insists that it will eventually fall apart. He reminds Thor that he had previously suggested reinforcing the raft more securely, but Thor remains firm. If they are to prove his theory, they must complete the journey using only the same primitive techniques their ancestors would have used. The cameraman, whose job is to document everything properly, decides to sit in the small lifeboat and move a short distance away from the main raft to capture wide shots of the expedition. He films Thor and the crew tirelessly working on the mission, showing their determination and effort. But within minutes, the water around his lifeboat begins to shift. Several sharks appear, circling quietly, almost as if waiting for the right moment to attack. Fortunately, Thor spots them in time and immediately uses a rope to pull the lifeboat back toward the raft. The cameraman is quickly hauled aboard, narrowly escaping what could have been a fatal attack. Thor is confused about why so many sharks are gathering near them, since sharks are typically drawn to blood or aggressive splashing, but it becomes clear they must stay constantly alert. Each crew member continues performing his assigned duties. One of the men has brought his beloved parrot along on the journey because he cannot bear to leave it behind. Suddenly, the parrot flies off and lands on the water, likely trying to drink. Within seconds, a shark lunges from below and devours the bird. The crew member is devastated and begins screaming in grief and rage. Consumed by revenge, he waits for an opportunity and grabs a passing shark as it swims close to the raft. With help from others, he drags it on board and brutally kills it with a knife. His anger drives him to kill one of the ocean's top predators, but this decision immediately creates a new danger. Blood pours into the water, spreading rapidly, and soon entire groups of sharks are drawn to the scent. The situation becomes far more dangerous, and tensions erupt among the crew as they argue over the reckless act. Thor struggles to control the chaos. At that moment, Haim steps forward holding steel cables, once again insisting that they should reinforce the raft by tightly binding the logs together to prevent them from separating. He has been saying this from the beginning. However, Thor refuses yet again, reminding everyone that they must follow the exact same primitive methods their ancestors used if they want their mission to remain authentic and credible. Thor refuses to allow any upgrades or modern changes, and in a burst of anger he grabs the steel cables and throws them into the ocean. Haim is furious, convinced that Thor is deliberately ignoring his advice. Overwhelmed with frustration and mental strain, Haim loses his balance and slips, falling straight into shark-infested waters. There is blood on his body, instantly attracting the sharks, and for a terrifying second it seems certain he will be torn apart. Fortunately, the crew reacts immediately and manages to haul him back onto the raft, giving him what feels like a second chance at life. Even so, his mental state remains unstable. By now, everyone understands that the rest of the journey will be even more dangerous. Days turn into weeks in the endless ocean, and conditions deteriorate rapidly. Supplies are nearly gone, their physical strength is fading, and their mental stability is cracking under pressure. Some crew members begin losing hope entirely, seeing nothing but water in every direction. The team's navigator, responsible for ensuring they are heading the right way using primitive instruments, starts to question whether they have drifted off course. He tells Thor that by now they should have sighted land if they were truly on track. Doubt spreads quickly, and several members turn against Thor, accusing him of leading them the wrong way. Yet Thor remains the only one who firmly believes they are still heading in the correct direction. He urges them to hold on to their determination and keep faith. Tension continues to rise with each passing day, until one morning the navigator checks their position again and discovers something shocking. They are exactly where they should be. If calculations are correct, they will reach the island within days. When this news spreads, the crew erupts with relief and excitement. After so much suffering, it feels like the first piece of good news they have heard in weeks, and the doubt that once surrounded Thor finally transforms into renewed confidence in his leadership. Luckily, their radio system suddenly begins working again, allowing them to reconnect with the outside world. They broadcast an update about their progress, and the news spreads rapidly that they are close to reaching their destination. Back in the city, the publisher and everyone who had once rejected Thor are stunned as they watch the reports, unable to believe that a simple handmade raft is actually crossing the ocean. If Thor and his team succeed in proving that South Americans were the first to reach the island using nothing more than a primitive raft, decades of accepted research could be overturned overnight. On the raft, Thor, his crew, and the navigator focus intensely on maintaining the correct direction. They rely strictly on ancient navigation techniques, just as their ancestors would have done, carefully tracking the position and movement of the sun to determine east and west. By identifying where the sun rises and setting their path westward, they create an invisible route across the ocean, following it toward the mysterious island that no one had ever dared to reach this way. Meanwhile, in the city, their journey dominates the news, and Thor's team becomes widely known. Now the only question on everyone's mind is whether they will not only prove their theory, but also survive long enough to return home alive. Several more days pass, and one morning a crew member suddenly spots something unusual. He points to birds circling in the sky, a powerful sign that land must be nearby. Instantly, excitement spreads across the raft. Everyone scans the horizon, and soon they see it, the island that until now had only existed in stories and theories. Thor feels a surge of emotion, hoping the island might hold clues about his ancestors, what they looked like, how intelligent they were, and how they managed such a journey. Carefully, they steer the raft toward the island, but they know the real danger lies near the shore, where powerful waves crash with intense force. One wrong move could smash their fragile raft against the surf and end their mission within sight of success. Instead of rushing in blindly, the entire team gathers to create a detailed, foolproof plan. They assess the wave patterns, current strength, and timing, each member sharing his perspective. In this critical moment, Thor steps up as a true leader, listening to every idea and combining them into a single coordinated strategy, determined to reach the island safely after surviving the unforgiving ocean for so long. They spend hours carefully studying the rhythm and intensity of the waves. Eventually, they notice a pattern. After a specific wave, a series of much stronger waves follows, crashing violently toward the shore. They also know the coastline is filled with rocks, and a direct collision could seriously injure or even kill them. So they decide on a precise plan: hold the raft steady until that key wave passes, then release it at the exact right moment so the powerful incoming surge will carry them forward with controlled momentum toward the island. The strategy is risky but calculated. However, just as they prepare to execute it and wait for the right wave, disaster strikes. The rope anchoring their raft snaps prematurely. They are released too early, before the main surge arrives. The waves grow larger and more aggressive, and the raft spins completely out of control, racing toward the shore at a speed far greater than they anticipated. With no time to adjust and unaware of exactly how violently they are being pushed, Thor and the crew are forced to jump into the water to avoid being crushed. The raft is completely destroyed against the rocks, but miraculously, no one loses their life. One by one, they struggle through the surf and finally reach the shore. As they step onto solid ground for the first time, the reality sinks in: they have done the impossible. Ordinary men with limited experience have crossed a vast and deadly ocean on a primitive raft. Not only have they survived, but they have also proven a groundbreaking theory: that South Americans could have reached this island using nothing more than such a raft. Exhausted but triumphant, Thor and his team gather their remaining supplies and set them down on the island, fully aware that they have just changed history. Every member of the team feels immense pride for being part of the mission, and for Thor, his lifelong dream has finally come true. In terms of exploration, he has challenged and reshaped accepted history. The most shocking part is that this entire mission is based on real life. Thor was a real person, his crew truly existed, and they actually crossed the ocean on a primitive raft, setting a historic record. The story is inspired by their real journey and the events they endured. Thor and his team refused to give up and accomplished something no one believed was possible. As a result, they became world famous and secured their place in history. The raft that carried them across thousands of miles was named the Kon-Tiki, and it has been carefully preserved so future generations can remember this extraordinary achievement. And with that, the story comes to an end.